Welcome to the Rest of Us podcast, where we explore rest as a form of self liberation as a community. I'm your host today, Dana Tenille Weekes. Today is really exciting for us, you all, because the Rest of Us podcast is live streaming from the 54th Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual Legislative Conference right here in Washington, D.C. And also today, my friends, I'm here with my dear friend, Nia. I'm going to give her full name in a second, Nia Ariel Davis Sagona. And just so you know, Nia is an executive coach, and she is an advisor behind Root and Bloom Strategies, a social impact agency helping leaders break down silos and collaborate for systems change. And just so you know, Nia is an attorney by training, and she is definitely an advocate by heart and at heart. And Nia brings 15 years of experience in executive leadership, policy, and advocacy across nonprofits and also governments. Nia helps mission-driven leaders develop skills, strategies, and systems to drive meaningful, not performative, my friends, not performative change. So I've shared a bit about Nia and her professional self. That's the professional version, but I want to add a personal touch to Nia. Nia's my dear friend, and I say that Nia is the is. And what I mean by that is just Nia is light. And her presence does things to you. Her presence allows you to push through. Her presence allows to see you at what is accessible, but also what's hard for you to see. Her presence allows you to shed and transform and to grow. And so that's why I see Nia as light. And so I could go on and on. I really could about Nia, but the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has only given us 30 minutes. So only for the sake of time, I'm going to stop talking about the love and respect and admiration I have for my friend and get into the podcast. So today, Nia and I will explore the power in and the necessity of us needing to cultivate the space to reimagine, and how all of this relates to rest. And for those of you who are on the YouTube channel for the CBCF and do not understand my meaning of rest, I'm just going to summarize it shortly. It is a liberating form of self-acceptance where you consciously navigate the world in your agency and belonging. So in short, rest means being deeply connected to your agency, your free will, and your decision making. So if anything in this episode feels like a message or a mirror, feel free to share this episode with someone in your life who needs to think about or is seeking to think about rest differently. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Nia to guide us in conversation today. So Nia.
Thank you so much, Dana. That was such a beautiful introduction. I appreciate you, and I'm very excited to be here and in conversation with you about rest. And so I actually wanted to start out, I heard you in your intro talk about reimagining rest as opposed to imagining rest. Could you talk a little more about that choice?
Yeah, so it's funny that you start off that way. The use of language is both important to Nia and I, especially since we were trained as lawyers, but I am actually intentional, Nia, about talking about reimagining instead of just imagining. And the reason for this is that when we were children, we really harnessed the power of of reimagining. And we did it in so many ways. Think about it. We had imaginary friends, or at least I did. I had plenty, y'all. Maybe my parents were concerned. We imagined worlds and we acted in them. I would be in my backyard and it would turn into me being a chef at a restaurant. I'm cooking quote leaves. So and things like that. And then we imagined artwork so much so that our parents would put it on our fridge or on our walls. And to this day, my mom keeps some of the Christmas ornaments I made in kindergarten because that was my imaginative side. I was harnessing the power of imagination. But here's the thing. When we are adults, when adults enter the picture, and society begins to shape our lives, it really interferes with our relationship with rest or with imagination. And we shift our imagination from something that drives us to create, that makes us feel like we are in charge of enlivening our own lives, to imagination now, where imagination is focused on worry. And so what happens is we imagine every worst case scenario, the ugly, the bad. And what that does is it really controls our lives differently, where we're seeking perfectionism, we're seeking control, we are in survival mode. And so that's why I say to people, we were born with imagination. So let's come back to imagining ourselves. So that's why I say reimagine instead.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you mentioned control, and that's something that I find really interesting about like us using our imagination to try to exert control. And yet we spend all of this on worry, like you said, on perfectionism. And so I'm interested just to hear a little bit more about where is the power in imagination and how can we use it in relationship with our rest?
Yeah. So I am still, to be honest, teasing out this relationship between reimagining and rest, because it really goes so deep. And the more and more I write about it, the more and more I'm learning about it myself. And the more I read about it, the more I'm learning about it myself. But what I will first say is that when we reimagine, it allows us to world build. And rest, in relationship to reimagining, rest allows us to stop reacting to the world and start reconnecting to our agency and our belonging. So I'm going to tease out that relationship where reimagining allows us to world build, but rest allows us to reconnect to our agency instead of reacting to the world we're presently in. And we all know the climate we're in right now. And so often I hear, Nia, people say all the time, the world doesn't see us or it doesn't see me. And maybe I'm getting into semantics here, but I contend with that just a little bit. And the reason why I contend with it is because I actually think society may not see us. Society does not contemplate us at many times, but the world is actually begging for us. And I say often on the podcast, for those who are new here, I'm going to repeat what I say all the time on the podcast, which is we were imagined with such detail that we were created. So if only we lived in the details of who we were and who we are, that is all the world is asking for. And so with that in mind, what that means is that many times we live in ways that are external to us, how we're told to live by society. And we've got to figure out ways of living differently. And that's very important because our belief system, how we think about ourselves, we don't do what we are told, we actually do what we believe. And so in thinking about how we live differently, we also have to think about how we get to believing that. And so I tell people there's this, first you have a thought, then you have an idea, then you have this understanding, then you have a knowing, and then you have a belief. And so reimagining comes into that lens because in order to transition something from in a thought all the way to belief, you're not going to have a clear path. You're going to have to imagine a world and start living in that world to get to the belief. So that is one thing I'll say about world building. The second thing I'll just say about the relationship with rest, so how reimagining relates to rest, is that rest allows you to cultivate space for a new normal. And what I mean by that is that rest also reminds you that you do have the courage to come back to yourself. So when you have to live differently, when there are no models for how you should live, when you've decided I want to live differently and you don't see models around you, you have to reimagine. And that requires you to also experience a few things. You may, Nia, and I know you personally because you're a dear friend, but there are times when you have to do something new, when you're in your new normal, where you need the courage to know that you'll feel isolated and to live in that isolation because everybody else around you is doing the same thing. And so rest helps you bring you back to yourself. It brings you back to, gives you the courage to reconnect to your agency. The other thing is when you're doing something differently, you flail and falter.
Right.
We talk about that a lot.
All the time.
We are flailing, y'all. We may look great today, but we are flailing at times. And you have to have the courage to stay in the flailing, in the faltering, to understand the mistakes and to know that's part of what you need to do. And then the last is that when you are doing a new normal, when you are trying to figure out ways of modeling differently, there are shifts. There are definitely shifts in how you do things, and you shift to the extreme. And what I mean by that is that when I took my journey of rest in 2022, it was interesting because I went from ignoring everything, ignoring all my needs, to the pendulum shift all the way to the other side where I became a hermit. And because I wanted to so deeply to quote heal.
Yeah.
And so eventually I had the courage to know that that's also an extreme, and I've got to find what works for me.
Yeah.
So just for those who are new to the podcast, because again, we're at CBCF, I just want to say that there are 3 forms of rest that you can cultivate this space. And so in cultivating the space to come back to yourselves, one form is doing nothing, where it allows you and reminds you that you have no obligation to this earth but to just be and not produce. The second is reconnecting or recharging your energy levels to figure out ways of not being in perpetual exhaustion. And the third is creating these liberating spaces where you feel enlivened by yourself. And usually that's rooted in creativity. And what some of you may not know is that Nia does cabaret. And so that is Nia's creative side. I do poetry. But we all, as I said before, are creative beings. And so having that creativity, that liberating activity, allows us to come back to ourselves.
Yeah.
So what I'll just say, and to end my answer here,
finish your thought,
is that this relationship between rest and reimagining, the thing is, if you cannot see yourself differently, no matter what people tell you, even if they see the best in you, you will not believe differently. And if you do not believe differently, you will not be different. And that is the relationship between rest and reimagining.
I love that. I love that. And I love how much you shared about just being younger and being in your imagination and the things that you allowed yourself to connect to. And I'm wondering, just, I mean, on this topic, like, what are some things that you connect to now to help yourself reimagine?
Yes. So for me, to connecting and reimagining, one of the things I do is I write poetry. Mm-hmm. It's a liberating activity of mine, but it's also a self-excavation activity, because it's really me contending with myself in a way where I'm showing myself so much grace.
Yeah.
And I'm allowing myself to make mistakes with the first draft. And I don't see any of these things as mistakes. I don't see things as rejection. I really just see them as opportunities to just be and grow within myself.
Yeah.
Another way that helps me reimagine is another liberating activity are long walks in nature, where I can just be and feel the sensory experience of nature, feel the wind or feel the sun on my skin. And to me, that's living poetically for me. So that's one way that I notice that I reimagine when I'm in that space. And one of the things the one last thing I'll say that I do to reimagine differently, this is a little bit different, but sometimes when I'm in nature, especially, what I'll do is I'll look at a quote flower and say, what if I did not know it was a flower? How would I describe it?
Ooh.
So how do I see things for myself, for my lens, rather than seeing things as they're told to me?
Yeah, no, I love that. And that really cuts to like the heart of creativity. Like you were saying at the beginning, you don't let yourself see these as mistakes, as failures, as anything like that, because how can they be if they don't exist yet? How can you create in a space that's larger and more liberated than what you were able to imagine before, or rather what others were able to imagine for you?
Yes, and also to your point, building on your point, it allows me to take away this notion that I have to be perfect. Because sometimes it's not a mistake, it's a happening in life.
Yes.
Right? And so when I don't have these labels of rejecting myself, it allows me to actually harness the power of reimagining, but it also allows me to harness the power of rest because I'm reconnecting to my agency.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So I'm interested then, I mean, how does one imagine their freedom and their liberation if you can't see it, if there's not already a standard that you're holding yourself to?
It's so interesting, Nia, because when I do when I do rest workshops, especially when I do them for Black women, there's an exercise I do that I say, let's focus on liberation. And often, usually every single time I do it, someone goes, I don't even know what liberation is.
Interesting.
So I'm glad you asked that question because I have been thinking about how do people cultivate space for reimagining or and seeing them and world building differently.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm going to share with you today is something that you actually can't do as you're listening to us. You're probably going to have to do after this podcast episode.
Love an activity.
It's an activity. You know, Dana loves an activity,
Right.
and it's self-reflection, y'all. It is self-reflection. And so this one is actually a writing assignment, and I only have one rule of don't. And that rule of don't is for this writing assignment, I do not, emphasis on do not want you to use AI.
Oh,
Okay? Because I want you to use your imagination and I don't want you to use artificial intelligence, emphasis on artificial. Okay? So for this writing exercise, I'm going to give you two choices, options in how you can approach this writing exercise. You can either approach it by writing about the values prompt, or you can approach it by writing about the dreaming prompt. So for the values prompt, this exercise focuses on a value you tell people, but you have been afraid to actually live.
Ooh.
Okay. So a value you tell people that you hold, that you say, I hold this value, but you deep down know you are afraid to actually live. And I want you to tell a story. I want you to write a story. Imagine a moment where you are living in that value when that value is tested. Okay. And I want you to focus on how you show up and how you are connected to your agency in that moment. So, for example, you may value honesty, but when your friend comes to you for advice, you dilute your honesty because you want to, quote, spare your friend's feelings. Okay. Or, for example, you value honesty, but a colleague at work makes an inappropriate joke, and the person who's harmed, their well-being is secondary to your comfort. Okay. So those are examples. So I want you to write based on the prompt a value you tell people you hold, but you're actually afraid to live. The second prompt or the second option you can take is the dreaming prompt. And this other writing exercise is I want you to think about a moment when you're fully living your dream. And if you're having difficulty pinpointing this dream, I want you to think about this lingering cloud that's been hovering over you for either weeks or months, years or decades, or even since childhood. And I want you to think about this cloud as being heavy. And if you should poke it, a thunderstorm will erupt, but that thunderstorm, that lightning is a revolution that will change your life and make it thrilling. Okay. And so for that, I want you to write about that moment where you are living where that cloud is popped. Okay. And for some of you, if you're looking for examples, it could be something that learning to play the guitar because you always did and you never know how revolutionary that could be in your life. Or it could be that you want to write a book. So you're going to choose one of those two prompts, either the values prompt or the dreaming prompt. And in either scenario, for either prompt, I want you to set a timer and free write for 10 minutes without editing. And after you write for 10 minutes without editing, I then want you to read your story out loud, preferably in a mirror so you can see yourself. Okay? So read your story out loud, preferably in a mirror. And then I want you to go back and rewrite your story. And I want you to rewrite it with these 5 lenses. One, I want to make sure that you told your story in first person using I and also in the present tense. So that's one. 2, I want you to write away any qualifiers by dreaming into them. And so what I mean by that is if you say something like, I can only do this if I have an opportunity, I want you to then write and make that opportunity real. So you take away the conditional.
Interesting.
Okay, you make it real. So there are no qualifiers in your story. The third is I want you to make all your language affirmative, meaning that there are no no's or no nots or can'ts. So you don't say there are no people in the audience who are negative. Instead, you said everyone there is affirming me. Okay. And the fourth thing is I want you to add as much sensory detail as possible. What does it feel like, both physically and emotionally? What does it smell like? What do you hear, see, taste in that space? And then lastly, I want you to let your imagination be concrete. I want you to look for any abstract words you have in your story. And for those of you who are wondering what are abstract words, they are commonly used terms, words that we use, but they are general. They are not unique to you. You don't know what they mean to you. So it could be words like beautiful or exciting or joyous or wonderful or proud. And what I want you to do is if you see an abstract word, I want you to ask the how question. How is this beautiful to me? How is this pretty to me? And I want you to write about that. So an example of that you may write something like I am proud. And instead of writing I am proud, you can write, as I write the last word in the third chapter of my book, I tell myself I'm doing this. That I, 3 months ago, had no words on the page, and now I have 3 chapters of a book. Okay? That is how you are proud. So, again, just as a reminder, you want to tell your story in first person and use present tense. You want to write away the qualifiers, dream into them instead. You want to make your language affirmative. You want to add as much sensory detail as possible. And you want to let your imagination be concrete. And I want you to give yourself about a week to do so with writing. No, I don't expect you to do this in like 10 minutes or so. And I want you to have fun with it because now you're reimagining, you're harnessing that power again. And then once you tell your story, I want you to ask yourself this question. What is a first small, doable action step that I can take to make this real? And I only Nia, want you to take that one step. I don't want you to take 20.
I don't know. That's going to be hard for the overachievers.
Right. Only want you to take that one step. We are trying to eliminate from our imaginations or imagining perfectionism.
Yeah.
Okay. So just that first step.
Yeah. I love this so much. And this is the first time I'm hearing this journal prompt. So I'm going to go home and do this myself. But one of the things that I find really interesting about it is that this exercise of reading it out loud. So you're hearing yourself and how you're describing things that really, this isn't an imagination that's coming from outside or coming from a different source. It's coming from within you. And you are just continuing to refine it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and that's why I also say read it in a mirror because first you're writing and you're sitting into your details. You're being enlivened by your details. Now you're telling yourself the details, but you're also seeing yourself tell yourself the details as well. So there's a lot of reinforcement and reaffirming in this experience.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
Have you done this exercise?
I have done this exercise in different ways.
Okay.
So for me, writing poetry is one way of doing this in a form. And so for poetry, there are a lot. So even though I've published, I've gotten my poems published, there are thank you. There are way more poems that are in a well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those poems self-excavate from the anger and rage, but a lot of those poems are world-building poems and how I see myself and how I storytell. And because I do poetry as a liberating activity, and what I tell people is to hold your liberating activities sacred. So I experience my world of poetry at least 3 hours a week. And so I'm constantly now in a place where I am actually world building and understanding myself. But outside of poetry, I also journal, and I do that. So I used to be hell-bent on writing all these strategic plans. But now what I actually do is envision myself in the thing that I want to achieve. And so I may not always write everything down in detail, but when I cannot see it, then I really go into the journaling of what does this look like present moment. So how can I start world building? How can I start living this now?
Yeah. And this is the second part of my put you on the spot question. What has come up for you when you've done these exercises?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. If I'm being honest, at first, what comes up is a lot of doubt. And I think that needs to come up because you have to kick up the dirt. You have to do things like that. So a lot of doubt comes up. But when I keep leaning into, as I said, dream into those qualifiers or make things concrete, there's this excitement that starts building. Like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
And I'm staying committed to it. So those are some of the things that come up. The other thing that comes up is I used to, when I first was on my journey of rest, I used to feel that I had to learn a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But now what I try to focus on when I do these activities is what is the thing I need to unlearn?
Ooh, yeah.
What are the things that I need to unlearn to come back to my own self?
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that come up. And also, a lot of times, what comes up a lot is, to be honest, anger and frustration at myself more than other people.
Interesting.
Right. So
Yeah.
at first, it's at other people.
Yeah.
But if I stick with it long enough, I realize what I'm upset about for myself, about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. That's, I mean, very transparent. And also, like, I think all of us have some doubt, especially when it comes to imagining and thinking of something that doesn't have an external kind of check mark on it or someone kind of approving of it. So, yeah, I get that so much. And so we're here at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual Legislative Congress, 54th. And as we're talking about reimagining and imagining, I'm interested to hear your take on what policymakers can do and change makers can do to lean into that power.
Yeah, that's a good question. Also, y'all, it's lively and bumping here at the CBCF. And so there's music going on, there are panels going on around us, and I love it. I love the energy that's happening. I would say for policymakers and also for advocates, how they can harness the power of imagination or reimagining is that as we are looking to dismantle systems, and quite frankly, I think our systems are being dismantled in a way that can serve us.
Absolutely.
Although we have to build community to protect our people from the harms that are resulting from this. So that's why community is important. At the same time, if we are still just reacting to how systems are being dismantled, but we are not reimagining what takes its place, and we do not have a nuanced understanding of how it takes its place, we're not seeing it in the details, then I think actually we are doing a disservice to ourselves in terms of policy making. And so a lot of these conversations talk about what's happening, but I would love a lot of the conversations to focus on let's reimagine differently. Let's get in a room and collaborate with each other. Not just about what policies need to be different, but how do we work together differently? Right. How do we implement differently and things like that?
Yeah, I love that. One of the mantras, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, one of the mantras that I have is to build a new world and stay ready to live in it.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. And that goes really to partly my definition of liberation. So this is why we're friends, my friend. This is why we're friends. This is why we're friends.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to hear if there are any other thoughts that you have around reimagining in this moment when it can feel really hard to be doing that, especially with, like you said, everything that's going on.
Well, I will just end by saying that, again, my friends, there are a lot of people out there who are telling us how to be, and they're expecting us to react, because the more we react to them, the more we're playing into their world. And so the power of reimagining is actually world building for ourselves at the micro level and also the macro level. So I think we're getting close to time. I'm seeing people come into the room here at the CBCF, and we understand because there are other podcasters that need to go on. And so I just want to first thank Nia so much for being with me today. I love this woman with my whole entire heart, and so I'm glad that she could be a part of the Rest of Us community. She's always been a part of the community,
I have.
But here today in this particular episode. And if you want to learn more about Nia, you can go to her website, which is Root Bloom Strategies, ROOT Bloom BLOOM Strategies.com. And with that, my friends, we are at the end of our episode. If anything felt like a message or mirror, feel free, as always, to share with someone who is seeking to think about rest differently. And for our Congressional Caucus listeners, while you have watched this episode on YouTube, you can listen to the Rest of Us podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, for everyone, please rate the Rest of Us podcast 5 stars or the top rating and leave a comment, a good one. I'm grateful for you doing so. In the meantime, let's build a community. You can find the Rest of Us podcast on Instagram at the Rest of Us podcast, where we'll have posts, reflection exercises, things to laugh about, and information on events and other resources we will curate together in this journey of rest. Thank you for being a part of the Rest of Us community. Until then, rest, my friends.